Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a story that's packed with twists, turns, and a whole lot of drama. Imagine finding out that your perfect life was built on lies. Your kids aren't yours, and your wife has been cheating with someone else. Well, that's exactly what happened to Mark Johnson. But instead of crumbling under the pressure, Mark decided to play the ultimate game of revenge, with a plan so cunning that it left everyone stunned, including the judge. Get ready, because this is a wild ride you won't want to miss. Wendy Johnson has been granted use of the house until the children graduate from high school, with Mr. Johnson continuing to cover the mortgage and utility payments. She is also entitled to half the value of her husband's business, and Mr. Johnson will maintain payments for her vehicle. Mrs. Johnson is awarded 60% of all assets, including bank accounts, investments, and retirement accounts. Additionally, primary custody of the children is granted to Mrs. Johnson, with visitation following standard protocols. This includes Mr. Johnson having 2 consecutive weeks during the summer and every other weekend. Child support is set at $750 per month per child, totaling $1,500 per month. Considering Mrs. Johnson's absence from the workforce for the last 5 years, maintenance of $2,000 per month is added. The divorce will be finalized in 90 days unless Mr. Johnson revokes the petition, concluding the proceedings. Judge Emily Parker banged her gavel as she began to rise. I uttered the single word that would lead to changes dominating the next several months of my life. Difficult? I wasn't sure what was difficult to understand. I responded to her challenge and offered to provide a definition if the word was challenging for you. Judge Parker froze mid-motion, her head swiveling so fast it seemed her neck might snap. A look of disbelief adorned her face, as if she couldn't fathom someone saying that word in her presence. Slowly she returned to her chair, her features shifting from shock to abject fury. Once she regained her former position, the frosty glare she directed at me could have frozen water on the surface of the sun. To say she was angry would be an understatement. "I'm not stupid, Mr. Johnson," she declared. "I know exactly what you're about to do, and I don't care. But these next few minutes? They're planned. You have 1 minute to apologize, or I will cite you for contempt of court." "Well, at least you'd be making one correct ruling today, Your Honor," I retorted. "Because I have nothing but contempt for this entire situation." My lawyer, Mr. Carter, harshly whispered in my ear, fumbling through his briefcase, possibly searching for something to silence me. Judge Parker sneered in response. "Strike that," she snapped, bringing down her gavel again. "Let's see how much contempt you have after 30 days in jail." "Make it 60. I shot back. "Want to go for more? Honestly, Your Honor, if you relaxed occasionally, maybe you wouldn't be such a difficult person." I extended my right hand with my middle finger up, mimicking the gesture with my left. "Find a way to unwind. You're in more dire need of a change than any woman in history." Reflecting on the situation, I thought someone might have dialed 911 around that time. I considered 2 possibilities. Either she was on the verge of a stroke, or her head was going to explode. Surprisingly, the smoke coming out of her ears wasn't visible. I didn't think it was possible for someone's face to turn that shade of red. After my outburst, she was clearly upset and sentenced me to 90 days. Her voice sounded almost demonic as the bailiffs took hold of me. Mr. Carter had a waffle look on his face, and the courtroom was shocked when I couldn't hold in my laughter. This probably explained the visitors, the psychologists, I had in lockup over the next couple of weeks. The letter from Mr. Carter's law firm the next day, stating they were dropping me as a client, wasn't a surprise. So, you're probably wondering what that was all about. Perhaps a little background is in order. My name is Mark Johnson, and I'm currently 31 years old. I was born to a very nice, middle-class couple in the American Midwest. I was raised on traditional values, where there was a strong sense of right and wrong. You respected those who deserved respect, and you didn't cheat. When you gave your word, it meant something. The ethos I grew up with was to work hard, be generous with what you have, and live up to your values. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Of course, most people never think about the flip side to that. Do unto others as they have done unto you. The Christian thing to do is to turn the other cheek, but unfortunately, I've never been good at that. I've always had what has been described as an extreme stubborn streak, combined with my sense of justice. Well, it sometimes got kind of ugly when I made up my mind that someone had done me wrong and set a course of action to deal with it. Nothing could dissuade me from my path. There was one time in high school when I was going out with Christine Haskins. We'd been dating for a couple of months by this time, and we had an argument about something, leading to our breakup. I put that in quotes because it was kind of understood that it was only temporary. We would apologize to each other a couple of days later and get back together. It wasn't the first time it had happened. We'd just used the weekend to cool off and make up on Monday. Unfortunately, on Saturday evening, I happened to be walking past the theater and saw my cousin, David, escorting Christine inside. Two things here. First, David and I were more like brothers than cousins. We were the same age and had been practically inseparable for as long as I could remember. His family lived on the same block as me, and we grew up together. Second, I knew that he also liked Christine. He knew we had broken up, but he also knew we would probably get back together after the weekend. But you simply don't do that to each other. From that moment on, he was dead to me. When Christine tried to talk to me on Monday, I simply refused to acknowledge her presence. At church on Sunday, David came up to me and tried to talk. I stared at him without saying a word. When he finished talking, I turned around and walked away. His family came over for Sunday dinner. I ignored him. He tried to play video games with me. I stopped playing and went to my room. Our parents tried several times to get me to talk to him, but I refused every time. Even a year later, after I actually took his girlfriend from him, I still refused to have anything to do with him. Oh, I did smack him up when he confronted me about stealing his girlfriend, but that was it. He sent me a wedding invitation years later. I ignored it. When I married Wendy, every member of my extended family got an invitation except him. Okay, so I'm a bit of an idiot and hold a grudge. The thing is, when someone wrongs me, I don't forgive unless it was an honest mistake. What David and Christine did was intentional. Right now, many of you think I'm an idiot. If that's the case, let me annoy you a bit more. I firmly believe that you shouldn't do the crime if you can't do the time. If you are foolish and mess up, you should fully face the consequences of your actions. If you drive drunk and get caught, expect to lose your license for a while, pay higher insurance, and perform community service, or whatever else is involved. If your job depends on you driving, you lose your job. I call that a foolish tax. If a girl chooses to engage in intercourse without protection and ends up pregnant at 18 years old, her foolish tax is being called mommy for the next 18 years. If a guy chooses to act irresponsibly and impregnates his prom date, he should be required to step up and take care of the child he was half responsible for. Choices have consequences. It's called personal responsibility. I refuse to have to pay for someone else's idiocy. So, I worked hard through high school and got pretty good grades. I earned some nice scholarships and went to college. I did well with the ladies and still kept my grades up. I was always on the better looking side, and I worked to maintain my health. Yes, I gotten into more than my fair share of fights in high school because of my personal beliefs, but I won more than I lost. Still, I was in good physical shape, and it seemed that women found me attractive enough. I graduated with an economics degree and an accounting minor. I went on to get my MBA and then got a decent job at a large company making really good money. Being single, with not a lot of bills to pay, I began playing the stock market. I found I had a knack for it and made out rather well. I had been working for a few months when I met Wendy at a party. We hit it off well, and I asked her out on a date. She accepted, and things progressed from there. I have to say, she was beautiful. I kind of laugh at that. Seriously, how many guys ever say their girlfriend is ugly? Sure, she may be unattractive to someone else, but to them, she is beautiful. Anyway, I can confidently say that Wendy was beautiful because she always attracted stares whenever we were out. Every one of my friends commented on how they'd try to move in if we ever broke up. Even some of my lesbian friends joked about trying to win her over if she ever became available. Eventually, I proposed, she accepted, and we got married. I should probably mention that Wendy did go to college. I like to joke that she went for her Mrs. degree. She didn't get that, but she did graduate with a degree in art history, which qualified her for her job as a barista at Starbucks. For those who are confused, an Mrs. degree signifies a girl who goes to college to put off adulting for a few years and graduates with a husband to take care of her for the rest of her life. Yes, I'm an arrogant idiot. Get lost. So, we settled into marital bliss. She quit her job a week before the wedding and settled into becoming a homemaker. Our married life was great, and we bought a nice 3-bedroom house. I was doing well at my job and making some nice money playing the stock market. We weren't living extravagantly, so we were able to set aside a considerable amount of cash. All my bonuses went into our investments, along with maxing out my 401k contributions. I aimed to retire before I turned 40 and savor life. Excelling in my profession, my employer rewarded me with substantial bonuses and promotions, putting me on the fast track up the corporate ladder. A few years into our marriage, I returned home one Friday evening to find Wendy dressed to the nines with a huge smile on her face. "Hurry up and get showered and change. We're going out to celebrate tonight, Daddy," she said. Holy moly, did she just say what I thought she said? I was shocked. We'd been trying for a few months, so it wasn't like this came out of the blue. Still, it was a surprise when she said it had finally happened. I took her in my arms, swung her around, and planted kisses all over her face, figuring we'd be muting our celebrations because of her pregnancy and then the baby for a while. We lit up the town that night. The next several months were filled with joyous times as we prepared for the new life we were bringing into the world. Then we got another surprise a couple of months later, twins. There were 2 little girls in there. I couldn't wait until I could start spoiling them and have 2 little daddy's girls wrapping me around their fingers. I was on top of the world. The day finally came. We rushed to the hospital, and our 2 little girls were born a few hours later. They were beautiful, healthy, and had all their fingers and toes. Being twins, they had to stay in the hospital a couple of days longer than usual, but everything turned out fine. When we took them home, both families were there to greet us, and everyone was happy. I noticed my mom, Patricia, staring at them almost constantly. I think she was so happy because I finally gave her the grandchildren she'd been wanting. Life changed for us. I decided that working for the big company was keeping me away from my family too much. I had a ton of money saved, so I decided to form my own company. I was doing pretty well investing and playing the market, so I decided to get the necessary licenses and open my own investment firm. I had already been helping a few of my friends and relatives, so I talked to them about becoming official clients. That started things moving. Once I opened, several former coworkers moved their portfolios over to me as well. Within a year, I had a decent client list, and several of them were discussing with their friends about moving over to me as well. When you're on top of the world, the only direction you can go is down. It was the girls' second birthday party, and we turned it into a full-on production. Sure, they would never remember it, but it was a celebration they could watch on video when they were older and enjoy it. All the family from both sides were there. We were all having a phenomenal time until I was just about to come out of the bedroom after using the bathroom. The hall bathroom had been in use just before I reached the door. I heard my mom talking to her sister, Susan, in the hallway. "I just can't figure out where those blue eyes came from," she said. "Why don't you just ask Mark?" Susan suggested. "Oh, I couldn't. Imagine if he found out they weren't his. He's so happy, it would just devastate him." I couldn't listen to the rest. I quietly retraced my steps back to the bathroom and locked the door behind me. I had to think. They had to be mine. Surely someone in our families had blue eyes? My eyes were kind of a muddy brown. Wendy's were more hazel, I thought. I went through a mental picture of all my relatives. The lone person I could think of without brown eyes was my cousin Mary, whose green eyes came from her non-blood-related father's side. Contemplating Wendy's family, I couldn't recall anyone on her side with blue eyes. After a while, I realized I needed to compose myself and rejoin the festivities before being missed. Suppressing my emotions, I put on a cheerful demeanor and returned to the party, enduring a challenging day. Although I acted as expected, I mentally strategized about what to do later. Eventually, things quieted down, everyone departed, and while putting the girls to bed that night, I scrutinized their features. Some resembled Wendy, but others were unfamiliar, and I found none definitively attributable to me. The next day, while Wendy napped with the girls, I ordered supplies delivered to my office, using a company credit card to keep the invoice hidden. Simultaneously, I researched local private investigation firms, as the suspicion that Wendy had cheated on me nearly 3 years ago became overwhelming. If she did cheat, was she still involved in infidelity? I needed proof. A few days later, the ordered items arrived, and I had also met with and hired a company named Pro Investigations, providing them with all the necessary information to access Wendy's cell phone, tablet, and laptop. Concurrently, I initiated some financial moves. If she wasn't cheating and the girls were genuinely mine, these actions wouldn't matter. However, if my suspicions were accurate, it would safeguard my money from her reach. I refused to fund her unfaithfulness or someone else's children. While the girls were innocent sufferers, so was I. If she chose to mess around and get pregnant by someone else, they could bear the financial responsibility. Nothing was finalized, but I awaited the proof. 2 weeks later, I received a letter at the office. Locking my door, I opened it and cried for an hour upon confirming they weren't mine. Deep down, I had sensed the truth but clung to hope. The following day, my private investigator met with me, providing all the proof he had obtained. Wendy was still involved with Brad Williams, her blonde-haired, blue-eyed personal trainer. She was meeting him a couple of days a week and even taking the girls to his apartment. The audio confirmed their awareness of the real biological father. The subsequent afternoon, I consulted a divorce lawyer. Rejecting his conventional advice, prioritizing the children's well-being, I insisted on preparing the documents but delayed filing until deemed appropriate. The preparations took 2 months, and with zero net income and assets on paper, I left Wendy surprised when my cousin David and his wife, Christine, showed up that weekend. I explained that David and Christine had come to see me in my office a couple of weeks ago. After some serious discussions, they acknowledged their wrongdoing, sincerely apologized, and I decided it was time to let things go. You might be thinking that I reconciled with David and Christine out of the goodness of my heart. Yes, it's true they'd visited me in my office and apologized. However, I may have overlooked a couple of irrelevant details, just coincidences. See, Christine's family includes members who, let's say, aren't above bending a few minor laws. Some are large and don't hesitate to engage in the occasional barroom brawl. There's even speculation, though irrelevant to this story, that a few might be enforcers for a local group of shady businessmen, but it's just gossip from those who don't like them. A couple of days before David and Christine's visit, there was a news story about a personal trainer at a local gym being mugged shortly after leaving work. Foolishly attempting to fight off the 5 muggers, he ended up with a broken jaw, shattered nose, broken ribs, a broken arm, a dislocated kneecap, and ruptured testicles. He'd be in the hospital for at least a couple of weeks. The police should address the crime issue in town, but there were no suspects since the attackers wore dark clothes, gloves, and ski masks. Doctors expect the blonde-haired, blue-eyed victim to fully recover after reconstructive surgery and significant physical therapy, although engaging in intimacy might be unlikely over the next couple of months. He'll also discover his car was taken to a chop shop, his credit cards maxed out, bank accounts emptied, and his identity stolen for the dark web, leading to years of legal battles. Surprisingly, Wendy was despondent for about a week after the mugging, possibly concerned about the rising crime rate. Despite my offer to enhance home security, she remained unsettled. On Monday morning, I instructed Mr. Carter to complete the paperwork and file it, aiming to have Wendy served on Friday in the late afternoon. He attempted to persuade me to make changes, but I remained firm. By Tuesday, the forms were ready for my review and signature. Meeting him at his office to finalize everything, he once again warned me against my course of action. After some thought, I decided to humor him, giving her the house and even throwing in the investments. However, I made it clear I wouldn't pay a dime beyond that. If she chose to keep the house, she'd be responsible for the mortgage and utilities. Notably, there hadn't been a dime in the investment accounts for over a month. I had no issue giving her 100% of zero. Unbeknownst to Wendy, I had been relocating all my tools and equipment from the garage gradually. I also moved belongings I wanted to keep out of the house, mostly from my home office. Tools and larger items found storage on David and Christine's ranch, while less valuable, smaller items were transferred to a 1-bedroom apartment in a complex owned by an offshore LLC. The owners of the LLC were surprisingly challenging to locate and verify. Friday morning arrived at last. I headed to work as usual. A couple of days earlier, I'd had David assist me in moving my truck to the office. I left my car, got into the pickup, and drove to the bank. At the bank, I cleared out all the accounts, leaving $100 in checking and savings. Next, I emptied the safety deposit box. I then drove to the ranch and combined all the cash and contents of the safety deposit box with my other belongings. I didn't want to risk them discovering a newly rented box at another bank and seizing it. Also, I wanted to avoid anyone tracing a wire transfer. Besides, I anticipated needing the cash later. You might be wondering why I trusted David and Christine. It was straightforward. The mortgage on their ranch was held by a certain offshore LLC with murky ownership. Moreover, despite our issues, David is still family to us, and you don't mess with family. The rest of the family takes such matters very personally. There was much joy in the family when David and I finally reconciled. Returning home late morning, I pulled over a couple of blocks away to check the GPS I had installed on Wendy's car. As expected, she was at the mall. Rushing home, I parked in the driveway. Over the past few days, I had packed up the rest of my clothes and belongings and placed them in the garage, tossing the few boxes in the truck. I went inside, grabbed the remaining clothes from the closet and dresser, not bothering to pack them, just grabbing them by the armload, hangers and all. It took only a couple of trips to toss them all inside the cab of the truck. I didn't bother closing the garage or even the front door. My cell phone rang as I was leaving the house. It was Wendy. Presumably, her cards didn't work when she tried to check out. Glancing at the GPS signal moving in my direction, I laughed, tossed my phone onto the table, and walked out the door. Within minutes I was several blocks away, arriving at my new apartment. I transferred everything from my truck into the appropriate rooms. 3 beers later, everything was put away, and as I sat back in my recliner, my new cell phone rang. Only a couple of people had this number, and my soon-to-be ex-wife was not one of them. Mr. Johnson? The voice on the other end said. We've served Mrs. Johnson. You'll have the video shortly. Okay, thank you. I disconnected. True to their word, 15 minutes later, I received the video in my email. To say she was shocked would be an understatement. Unfortunately, the video only covered her being served until she dropped to the floor. The process server checked to ensure she wasn't injured and left. The video concluded at that point. I would have liked to have witnessed her reaction once she began reading the divorce petition, realizing I had DNA and video evidence of her infidelity. From that moment on, things moved at the speed of a glacier. I received several phone calls, a few from my old office, as she had called multiple times trying to reach me. Apparently, she didn't believe them when they informed her I'd resigned and hadn't worked there for the last 2 weeks. She even showed up in person, demanding to see me, but that didn't end well for her. It took the police being called to escort her off the property. David made a couple of calls. She began pressuring him to reach me, suspecting his sudden appearance was too coincidental with my abrupt divorce. Restraining orders for my former company and David were filed, compelling her to cease. 2 weeks later, Mr. Carter finally contacted her to find out who her lawyer was, but she hadn't hired one yet. First off, she was quickly running out of money. All she had was the cash in her purse and the $200 I left in the bank accounts. She started leaning on her parents for support. I relaxed, not starting any projects, planning to be unavailable for a while and avoiding leaving anything she could take. Eventually, she got a lawyer, and meetings were scheduled. I declined to attend, giving my lawyer firm instructions, not a single penny more. Tempers flared at those meetings, leading to arbitration, which I had to attend. But it didn't go well. During the proceedings, questions arose about the whereabouts of the money. Accusations were thrown, with her questioning. Where is all the money, idiot? What money? All our money is gone. We're flat broke. In fact, I'm living in the cheapest, single-bedroom apartment I could find, chosen for affordability and my acquaintance with the owner. All investments, checking, and savings disappeared due to a disastrous investment. Investing in a cheating wife. Well, that part was true. I didn't know where all those offshore banks kept their cash. We're giving her the house, Mr. Carter suggested, with her name as the only one on the title. He could have been more forceful, but he sounded like someone observing a tornado-ravaged house. commenting that at least the rubble hadn't caught on fire. The mortgage is maxed out. I can't possibly afford the monthly payments. Wendy screamed, and it pretty much went downhill from there. The mortgage is maxed out. I can't possibly afford the monthly payments. Wendy screamed, and it pretty much went downhill from there. Child support? I scoffed. Not my kids, not my problem. Spousal maintenance? Alimony for you? No job, no income, no way. She demanded 70% of the liquid assets, but there were none. 50% of the business? Good luck. 150% of the retirement? Lost it all. Arbitration failed spectacularly. That brings us to our day in court, facing the dishonorable Judge Emily Parker. She was the most feminist, man-hating family court judge, harsher on men whose wives cheated. Yeah, I was screwed. If you're planning to criticize me for thinking I could convince them there was no money, you'd be wrong. Aware that they could check accounts, I wasn't surprised when the judge used those numbers to calculate my liabilities. The thing is, they had no way to access it. I needed the time to transfer funds around through different banks and different accounts. I even went so far as to personally withdraw all the money from one bank and then deposit parts of the withdrawal into several other accounts at separate banks. Of course, those accounts were under several different names. One of the rather shady businesses Christine's family was involved with was a gag gift shop where you could buy fake IDs, for entertainment purposes only, that was even printed on the ID cards. I possessed an ID claiming I was Jesus Christ, enhancing pranks. When people exclaimed, "Jesus Christ," I'd reveal my fake ID, which cost about $150 and was skillfully crafted. The only giveaway was the entertainment statement. For a higher fee, they'd omit the warning. I electronically transferred money to other accounts, potentially traceable, but costly and time-consuming. Now, back in front of the man-hating judge. 60 days into my 90-day county jail stay, short-term sentences are served in county jail, not state prison. She sneered and asked if I'd learned my lesson yet. About not marrying a cheating spouse? I grasped that long before your courtroom, Your Honor. I meant your attitude in my courtroom, Mr. Johnson. The vein on her forehead was popping, not ideal for her blood pressure. I wouldn't have an attitude problem if I wasn't being railroaded in front of kangaroos. Honestly, I was becoming concerned about her health with how her blood pressure must spike during these little visits. 30 more days for that. She then brought up the purpose of the meeting, questioning why I hadn't made my first 2 child support or maintenance payments to my ex-wife. She also inquired about the absence of my lawyer, questioning if they were overwhelmed. In frustration, she threw her hands up. You know, I was under the mistaken impression that being really smart was a requirement to be a judge. Thank you for correcting me on that. Deep breath in, deep breath out. This woman was going to give herself an aneurysm. Let me explain this so you can understand. Sorry, if it's still over your head, but the lowest I can go is so a 5th grader can comprehend it. Do try to keep up. I was really starting to think she didn't like me. I'm in jail. I have no access to money. Since I have no access to any money, I'm unable to send any money. And since it was your ruling that put me here, maybe you should explain why you're the reason the cheating woman can't get the money she's trying to take from me. Did I get all that, or do I need to explain it slower? I was then escorted back to my cell for another 90 days, 30 from my original sentence, 30 from her first hike, and another 30 that I'd managed to catch at the end. To be honest, it really wasn't that bad. Sure, the food sucked, but I still ate it. I had a nice bed to sleep in and lots of free time to relax. I made good use of the weights and exercise machines. I didn't have many problems there. First off, it didn't take too long for my courtroom antics to become common knowledge inside the jail, which made me a few friends. Second, did I mention that Christine's family has a few connections that could be of help to someone on the inside? In fact, there was only one problem, and it came from one of Wendy's less intelligent cousins. He entertained the idea of getting arrested for a minor offense and spending a week in jail to teach me a lesson. Unfortunately for him, the entire jail population recognized him before he even set foot inside. It didn't take much brainpower to discern his intentions. Spotted halfway across the yard, an inmate collided with him while tossing a football, an accidental elbow to the gut occurred. But he continued his quest. Foolishly, he was struck by a basketball after another 20 feet. The passer apologized profusely, and an accidental elbow to the chin followed while he was being helped up. After shaking off the incident, he resumed his trek toward me. With my back turned, he attempted a sucker punch. But I wasn't clueless. Anticipating it, I spun around, delivering a forceful kick to his groin, a clear 65-yard field goal. His accumulated misfortunes caught up with him, leading to his transfer to the infirmary. 2 days later, he refused yard exercise, spending most of his time in his cell until he was released. Back in court, facing the judge, she inquired if I was ready to apologize. Apologize for what? I asked. Your vile courtroom outbursts. I really don't know what you're talking about. Dismissively, she warned me to keep a civil tongue, or she'd extend my stay. You know, they might just bring in another judge. You're really on my last nerve. See? I might start stomping my feet. Maybe we'll need an EMT in here if you have a stroke. Mr. Johnson. Just pointing out there's been 0 child support, 0 maintenance, 0 mortgage payments, 0 utilities paid, as ordered. Can't exactly pay anything while I'm in jail, which means I also can't work. And just a reminder, those aren't my kids. My ex-wife was unfaithful. Maybe she should have to pay for her own life. Maybe even be charged. And another thing, I already gave her half the business. She should have plenty of money. Wendy's lawyer, Ms. Adams, interjected, explaining that they'd been unable to take possession of her client's part of the business. Mr. Johnson sold his company to an overseas entity about 2 months before filing for divorce, Your Honor. We haven't been able to determine the actual owners to address the court order. Suddenly, an attractive woman approached, stating she represented the board of directors for the firm that purchased the business. She moved to dismiss the ruling, giving Mrs. Johnson any part of a business owned by her ex-husband. Your Honor, it was irregular to award ownership without the business's involvement, as the purchase predated the divorce. This company has no bearing on the case, and we reject any claim of ownership by Mrs. Johnson. This company has no bearing on the case, and we reject any claim of ownership by Mrs. Johnson. The woman stated firmly. Someone queried about the money from the sale. The young woman explained, regarding Mrs. Johnson, the transfer of ownership and payments were conducted overseas. I'm not privy to that information, but my understanding is that the money from the purchase never entered U.S. territory, making it not subject to U.S. laws. Any claim on that money needs to be addressed with your ex-husband, possibly in the country where the money is located. And what country is that? Ms. Adams pressed. The original transfer of funds was in Belgium, but my understanding is that the money was transferred somewhere else shortly after the sale. I have no idea where it was transferred to. The young woman replied. Mr. Carter spoke up again, expressing desperation on behalf of my ex. Your Honor, the house is going into foreclosure, as the mortgage hasn't been paid in 3 months, and the utilities are on the brink of being cut off. My client's parents assisted a bit initially, but it's becoming too much for them. Despite finding a job as a waitress at a local diner, the income isn't sufficient to maintain the house. Judge Parker turned to me. Mr. Johnson, you have 1 week to bring all the payments up to date. Let me bend over and pull some cash out of my non-existent back pocket, then, Your Honor, because I'm physically unable to comply. I'm in jail. I have 0 access to any money. I can't work due to my incarceration. Thus, I can't obtain any cash. I don't have a money tree growing in my cell, in case anyone had that misconception. I'm financially broke. I don't even have a lawyer. These phantom accounts everyone keeps talking about? Even if they existed, I wouldn't have access to that information. I need my financial records, which, surprise, no one seems to be able to find. Show me the account numbers. Where's this money coming from? Checking account's empty, savings is empty, investments are gone, and my company? The company was in bad shape due to previous bad investments. I had to sell it cheap to cover expenses. There was nothing left. In response to the court's skepticism, I shrugged. Believe what you want. I couldn't even muster up the energy to be angry anymore. Show me the account information, then. Where's this secret stash where I supposedly hid millions of dollars? I challenged myself. Maybe my ex-wife stole the money while she was busy with her boyfriends. Ms. Adams objected, stating that my accusation didn't make sense. It makes about as much sense as keeping me in jail where I have no access to money and then demanding I make all these payments. Mr. Johnson. Judge Parker began, her voice dangerously low. Are you aware that I can keep you in jail until you pay? I responded by looking at her as if she'd just grown a third eye. Then I played along. That sounds perfectly logical, Your Honor. Keep me locked up where I'm demonstrably unable to abide by your orders while simultaneously making demands that are physically impossible for me to accomplish. Brilliant. 3 months later, the house underwent foreclosure, leading Wendy to lose her Lexus due to payment challenges. Unable to afford an apartment for herself and the girls, she resorted to living with her parents while working 30 hours a week at the diner. Desperate, they pleaded with the judge to release me so I could initiate payments. Meanwhile, her lover boy, now out of the hospital and engaged in physical therapy, spent hours daily trying unsuccessfully to resolve his financial situation. The silver lining was the prevention of new credit card accounts being opened in his name. Given his severely diminished credit rating, with only minimal insurance coverage on his car and part-time employment at the gym, he couldn't benefit from it and faced high deductibles, making it a lengthy process to pay off his medical bills. Having secured legal representation, a perk of no longer being considered completely insane by every lawyer in the state, I reached a deal with the judge for release from jail to secure employment and initiate payments. I'd have to surrender my passport, due to suspicions of hidden funds, and being a flight risk. I began working at Taco Bell and lived at the ranch with David and Christine. Although discreetly observed, I was aware of the surveillance. Yet, most of the cash was already in my possession. This routine persisted for the next 3 months. Wendy utilized a court order to garnish my minimum wage from Taco Bell, yielding minimal gains for her. During this time I finalized my plans with David. He'd emptied my apartment while I was in jail, and my belongings were divided among my extended family. Packages were shipped from them to a common location, undetected by surveillance. Guests discreetly moved packages to their vehicles during visits and barbecues over the next couple of weeks. I spent my time either working or at home, avoiding going out. Taco Bell eventually obtained a restraining order against Wendy due to her constant harassment at the restaurant, which became disruptive. Despite the option of termination, a discreet payment to the manager preserved my employment. For legal meetings, my lawyer visited the ranch. Initially, she had represented the new owners of my former company in court, and subsequently, I hired her as my lawyer. Her name was Julia, and she possessed a bold nature akin to a barracuda, especially during our poolside encounters. Don't worry, nothing scandalous, we weren't that kind of lawyer-client relationship. When I dismissed any ethical concerns, she simply smirked. Honey, lawyers invented scruples as a form of payment. Morals are just large paintings on walls. All right, so you're probably wondering about my finances. Yes, indeed, I did sell my firm. No, I didn't sell it to myself. I wasn't going to provide Wendy with any chance to stumble upon information she could use to claim any part of the firm. I was divesting from it. Besides, I wanted the cash. The sale happened overseas, and since the money never entered United States jurisdiction, it wasn't subject to any U.S. laws. The only way Wendy could access it was if I bought any of the money into a U.S. bank, making it vulnerable to her claims due to the judgments against me. That simply wasn't going to happen. It was a significant sum, complemented by my investment accounts, in the $10 million range. Cash on hand, from the safety deposit box, checking and savings accounts, and a safe, equaled around $200,000. Some of the cash I'd used for my plans, but I still had about $150,000 on hand. I wasn't planning to take any cash with me. So, it was a lovely Saturday afternoon, and we were having another barbecue with the extended family. All the preparations were complete, and everything was set. The party was a blast. I assisted David with the grill and smoker. Julia was there, too. Later in the afternoon, one of Christine's uncles approached me, expressing gratitude for helping Christine and David. He was glad that we had finally reconnected. We chatted, and he handed me an envelope. I passed it over to Julia for safekeeping. Later in the evening, I made an announcement. The lien holder for the ranch has declared the mortgage paid in full. David and Christine now own this place free and clear. This caused a huge celebration, and we partied hard that night. It was late when the guests started to leave. Julia couldn't stay the night because she had a flight to catch the next morning. She left with a group of 6 other cars. Interestingly, her flight was out of an airport in the next state. She had packed previously and had everything in her leased car when she came to the party. She never went to her rented apartment, instead going straight to the airport. No one witnessed a man climbing out of the back of her car in the parking garage, and no one took notice of the man casually walking 50 feet behind her as they made their way to the international terminal. Mark Johnson couldn't travel outside the U.S. because he had surrendered his passport to the court. Mitchell Nelson's passport never even garnered a second look. No one even gave a second look as they held hands in adjoining seats, flying first class to Mexico City. Julia Davis suddenly disappeared there. Instead, Jamie Nelson joined Mitchell Nelson for their connecting flight to Ecuador. 2 days later, Greg and Samantha Cooper reached their hacienda on the Caribbean coast of Belize. They were prospering in the small village, living in one of the larger haciendas with several luxuries. Guests visited occasionally, including David and Christine and other family members. It was a simple yet delightful life for Greg and Sam, who loved each other deeply. Most evenings, they entertained guests in the cantina or their lavish hacienda. Wealthy and pleasant to all, they were quickly accepted into the community. Whenever a need arose, they generously donated. Greg played the stock market when not on his boat or in the cantina, even setting up accounts for some locals and assisting them with their finances. As for the dishonorable Judge Emily Parker, I had a good laugh a few years after escaping to Belize. Seems Judge Parker, the man-hating woman, was caught cheating with a man. The judge had adopted her wife's 3 kids when they'd married. Since their split, Judge Parker had been paying child support, maintenance, and house payments for her ex-wife. To add to the humiliation, her ex-wife swiftly moved her boyfriend in, publicly continuing their affair. Although not officially married, they acted like a typical couple. Rumors circulated about their wedding date, set for exactly 1 week after their youngest son graduated from college, coinciding with the end of Judge Parker's financial obligations. And there you have it, folks, a tale of betrayal, cunning, and ultimate escape. Mark Johnson didn't just get even, he flipped the script entirely, leaving his past behind and starting a new life far from the chaos. It's a reminder that sometimes when life deals you a bad hand, you've got to play smart and think ahead. Whether you agree with his methods or not, there's no denying that Mark's story is one for the books. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more incredible tales, and let us know in the comments what you think about Mark's journey. Until next time, stay sharp and keep watching.